They didn't lose feelings. They lost respect. That sentence makes people uncomfortable because it attacks the story most of us tell ourselves. We like to believe love fades because of time, or distance, or stress, or misunderstandings. But in most relationships where attraction quietly dies, the real cause isn't neglect. It's over-explaining. There was a couple that looked perfect from the outside. They talked every day. They shared everything. They communicated. And yet slowly something shifted. He started explaining himself more. His feelings, his intentions, his fears, his insecurities. Every silence needed clarification. Every mood needed reassurance. Every disagreement needed a breakdown. He thought he was being mature. He thought he was being emotionally intelligent. He thought this was what love required. She stopped leaning in. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just subtly. Replies became slower. Touch became lighter. Energy became neutral. He noticed it and then explained even more. That's where most people get it wrong. They think attraction fades because communication stopped. In reality, attraction fades when communication turns into justification. When every emotion needs permission. When every behavior needs an explanation. When every interaction needs to be processed until there's nothing left to feel. Desire doesn't disappear from conflict. It disappears from predictability. And predictability is often disguised as reassurance. Stoicism has a brutal but honest view on this. The Stoics believed that strength isn't loud. It isn't defensive. And it doesn't over-clarify itself. A man who constantly explains his emotional state is not showing depth. He's revealing dependence. Not because emotions are bad, but because control over emotion matters more than expression of it. Here's the uncomfortable psychological truth. Attraction isn't built on knowing everything. It's built on sensing stability. And stability is felt, not explained. When someone feels the need to constantly reassure, clarify, and emotionally narrate themselves, it signals something the mind picks up instantly. I need you to feel okay so I can feel okay. That's where respect quietly erodes. The woman in this story didn't stop caring because he was vulnerable. She stopped feeling desire because he stopped being grounded. There's a difference most people miss. Healthy communication doesn't mean emotional exposure on demand. It means emotional containment with selective expression. When a man explains every feeling in real time, he removes mystery. When mystery disappears, polarity collapses. And without polarity, desire struggles to breathe. This is why people ask the wrong question. They say, so should we stop communicating? No, but you should stop over-translating your inner world. There's a reason the most attractive people aren't the most expressive ones. They're the most composed. They don't rush to fix perception. They don't panic over misinterpretation. They don't chase emotional alignment. They trust their presence more than their words. In that couple's story, the more he tried to be understood, the less she felt him. Because desire doesn't grow from explanation. It grows from contrast. The Stoics warned against becoming enslaved to outcomes. When you explain too much, you're trying to control how someone feels about you. You're managing their emotions instead of regulating your own. That's not communication. That's anxiety disguised as care. And anxiety is never attractive. Think about it.
Have you ever been drawn to someone who constantly needed to clarify themselves?
Who always checked if you were okay? Who feared being misunderstood? Probably not. Because respect forms when someone stands steady even when things feel uncertain. The man in this story believed reassurance would bring closeness. What it brought was familiarity. And familiarity kills tension. Without tension, desire loses its edge. This is where modern advice goes wrong. We're told, talk it out. Express everything. Never leave things unsaid. But the human nervous system doesn't bond through information alone. It bonds through emotional rhythm. Push, pause, presence, silence. When everything is explained, there's no space left for feeling. Silence is not the enemy of connection. Neediness is, and over-explaining is often just neediness wearing the mask of maturity. She didn't wake up one day and decide to lose respect. It faded because his center moved from within himself to her reactions. He started tracking her moods, reacting to her distance, explaining to prevent loss. That's when the power dynamic shifted, not because she wanted dominance, but because he surrendered his internal anchor. Stoicism teaches that dignity comes from self-command, not emotional suppression, but emotional sovereignty. A man who can feel deeply without broadcasting every emotion creates a sense of safety. A man who needs constant emotional clarity creates tension. That's the paradox. Love doesn't die from silence. It dies from emotional overexposure without self-control. And this is where the real lesson begins. Because the question isn't whether to communicate less. The question is whether your communication comes from strength or fear. Fear always speaks faster than strength. That's why over-explaining feels urgent. It feels necessary. It feels like you're preventing damage. But what you're actually doing is exposing insecurity before it's even questioned. The moment someone starts explaining their emotions preemptively, the dynamic changes. Not because the explanation is wrong, but because the timing reveals motive. Strong communication responds. Weak communication anticipates rejection, and the nervous system can tell the difference. In the couple's story, nothing bad happened. No betrayal, no major fight, no dramatic turning point. What happened was slower and far more common. He began narrating himself, why he felt quiet, why he needed space, why he reacted the way he did, why something bothered him, why something didn't. He was trying to be transparent. But transparency without containment becomes emotional leakage. Instead of letting emotions pass through him, he handed them over for evaluation. And once you ask someone to evaluate your emotional state, you hand them power. Respect erodes not because someone learns too much, but because they learn you don't trust yourself to handle discomfort alone. This is where Stoicism draws a hard line. The Stoics believed that self-respect comes from mastery over reaction, not elimination of feeling. You can feel deeply, one without explaining immediately. You can be affected without broadcasting instability. Most people don't lose attraction because they communicate. They lose attraction because their communication removes tension and authority at the same time. Think about what mystery actually is. Mystery isn't silence. Mystery is restraint. It's knowing something and choosing not to spill it just to be understood. When reassurance replaces restraint, polarity collapses. The woman in this story didn't consciously think, "I lost respect." Her body responded first. Her tone changed. Her excitement dulled. Her curiosity faded. Because curiosity cannot survive where everything is explained. Desire needs unanswered questions. Not confusion, but space. Here's the critical misunderstanding. People assume mystery means manipulation. It doesn't. Manipulation hides truth. Mystery delays disclosure until there's grounding. Over-explaining doesn't build trust. Consistency does. And consistency is shown through behavior, not emotional monologues. The more he explained his intentions, the less she trusted his stability. Because intentions mean nothing without emotional self-regulation. Stoicism teaches that clarity must come from action before words. A man who is calm does not need to explain calmness. A man who is grounded does not need to defend his grounding. Once words become the primary tool to maintain connection, attraction weakens. Because desire responds to presence and not persuasion. This is why the most damaging sentence in many relationships is never said out loud. It's felt. I need you to feel secure so I can feel secure. That's the moment respect starts leaking away. Not because dependence is immoral, but because it reverses polarity. Attraction thrives on groundedness, and groundedness cannot be talked into existence. The man in this story believed reassurance would create safety, but reassurance only works when it's occasional, not constant. When reassurance becomes a habit, it signals fear of loss, and fear of loss is louder than love. This is where the question in the comments always appears. So what are we supposed to do and stop communicating? No, you're supposed to stop communicating from anxiety. Communication that comes from stability strengthens connection. Communication that comes from fear erodes respect. The difference is subtle, but everything depends on it. Stoicism doesn't promote emotional silence. It promotes emotional discipline. A Stoic does not explain himself when misunderstood, unless explanation serves truth, not comfort. He does not rush to soothe tension. He allows tension to exist without collapsing under it. Because tension reveals character. When you remove all tension through over-clarification, you remove the space where attraction lives. This is why some relationships feel flat even when everything is healthy. There's no polarity, no contrast, no emotional charge, just information. And information doesn't seduce. The couple reached a point where she felt emotionally ahead of him. Not because she was stronger, but because he made himself smaller by constantly seeking emotional alignment. Alignment feels safe, but safety without polarity becomes dull. Desire requires an edge, not unpredictability, not cruelty, but self-command. When someone explains themselves endlessly, they lose that edge. Because they've already given up authority over how they are perceived. They've handed perception to the other person and said, "Please see me correctly." And the moment you need to be seen correctly, you stop being felt. This is why silence often feels powerful. Not because silence is magic, but because silence suggests self-trust. It says, "I can handle this without collapsing." That's respect. The woman didn't stop loving him because he cared too much. She stopped feeling drawn because he stopped trusting his own center. And once that happens, desire has nowhere to root itself. Stoicism teaches us that inner stability is the foundation of all external harmony. If your peace depends on being understood, you are already unstable. If your self-worth depends on reassurance, you are already losing ground. The lesson isn't to communicate less. It's to communicate from a place where silence is not a threat. Because the moment silence feels dangerous, attraction is already in decline. Respect doesn't disappear loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue. It simply withdraws. That's why most people don't notice it happening. They feel the distance before they understand the cause. The couple in this story didn't end because of a lack of love. They ended because the emotional dynamic quietly inverted. At some point, she stopped feeling held by his presence. Not because he stopped caring, but because he started needing care more than he could provide steadiness. That's the silent killer of attraction. When emotional leadership collapses, reassurance replaces grounding, and reassurance is never a substitute for stability. Here's the harsh truth most people don't want to face. You cannot explain your way into being respected. Respect is felt through emotional posture, not emotional transparency. This is where Stoicism becomes brutally relevant. The Stoics believe that dignity comes from how a person handles uncertainty, not by eliminating it, not by talking it to death, but by standing firm while it exists. When someone over-explains, they're trying to eliminate uncertainty externally. But uncertainty is not a problem to be solved. It's a condition to be endured. The man in this story didn't fail because he communicated. He failed because he communicated instead of regulating. Instead of sitting with discomfort, he tried to soothe it. Instead of trusting the bond, he tried to manage perception. And once perception management enters a relationship, authenticity leaves. This is the moment when communication turns performative. You're no longer expressing truth. You're seeking reassurance, and the body knows the difference before the mind does. That's why attraction fades before logic catches up. The woman couldn't articulate what changed. She just felt less pulled, less curious, less engaged, less alive, because desire doesn't respond to effort. It responds to polarity, and polarity requires difference, not alignment at all costs. Modern relationship advice worships communication as a cure-all, but communication without self-command creates emotional noise. Too much clarity too early suffocates attraction, not because people enjoy mystery, but because mystery allows emotional breathing room. Stoicism doesn't teach men to be cold. It teaches men to be centered. There is a critical distinction here. Coldness is withdrawal without presence. Centering is presence without dependence. One pushes people away. The other invites respect. The man in this story unknowingly crossed that line. He didn't stop being loving. He stopped being anchored. And once that anchor is gone, reassurance becomes endless. Every explanation demands another. Every clarification opens a new doubt. Because explanations do not create certainty. Self-trust does. This is why the question in the comments always sounds the same. So should we stop communicating? No, you should stop narrating yourself to avoid discomfort. You should stop translating every emotion before it is settled. You should stop explaining yourself to prevent loss. Communication should reveal strength, not compensate for its absence. The Stoic approach is simple but not easy. Feel fully, pause before speaking. Let emotions settle before expressing them, not to withhold, but to speak from stability instead of urgency. Urgency is the enemy of respect. Urgency says, I need this fixed now. Strength says, I can hold this without collapsing. And the nervous system responds to that difference immediately. The woman didn't lose attraction because he talked too much. She lost attraction because his words started carrying weight they shouldn't have. Words became emotional lifelines, and lifelines reveal dependency. This is why silence feels powerful in certain moments. Not because it's a tactic, but because it shows self-sufficiency. A man who can sit in silence without panic communicates more than words ever could. He says, I trust myself. And trust in oneself is the foundation of being trusted by others. The relationship didn't fail because love died. Love was still present. But desire cannot survive where respect has drained away, and respect drains when someone abandons their emotional center to keep someone else close. Stoicism teaches that the only thing truly within your control is your response, not someone's feelings, not their attraction, not their validation. When you stop trying to manage outcomes, your presence strengthens. When your presence strengthens, respect returns. And when respect exists, attraction either stabilizes or ends cleanly. Both outcomes are healthier than slow erosion. This is the final paradox. The more you try to hold love together with reassurance, the faster it slips through your fingers. The more you trust your inner steadiness, the more naturally connection aligns. They didn't lose feelings. They lost respect. And respect is not rebuilt through explanation. It's rebuilt through self-command. Through silence when silence is needed. Through words when words are earned. Through presence that doesn't beg to be understood. That's the Stoic truth most people learn too late.